Floating as a wreck. The storms have hacked you all to pieces. Your life is permanently brought to ruin. You have nothing left but endless bitterness, remorse, and tears. And you lie shackled, shattered, incapacitated as a wreck, while you notice with some wonder, although without sails, a slaughtered broken hulk, with nothing left of any navigation skills, that you keep floating, it may be in a dead calm, just before the final storm, the definite destruction, but it never comes. Although you feel like dead and are like dead, you are kept forcibly alive, almost against your will, a most involuntary grace, like being sentenced not to death, but to what must be worse, continued life in utterly outrageous circumstances. And the only thing that you can do about it is complying with the judgment in subordination, in the inescapable necessity of making just the best of it. The poet's best friend. The pain of life can sometimes be unbearable, especially if there is no end to it, but it just keeps increasing in outrageous agony to transcend all the tortures of eternity of hell. But strange enough, there is a comforter at hand, a possibility and way out of all vicious circles, and especially all poets usually found him the best of friends, and yet is the greatest paradox of all as comforter, inspirer of life and liberator as a way to new life, but it works, as both John Keats and Pasternak and others found to their surprise, that there is always a relief of intimacy and true friendship in the association with the ultimate perdition, death, as a security alternative if nothing else works out. The suicidal comfort never has to be accomplished, but as an idea of meditation and of spiritual rebirth, in a kind of revitalization, it is always handy as a comfort. How lonely are you? There is no loneliness in loneliness. The universe is there and waiting for you, while in company it is closed up for you, as friends and lovers must have all your main attention. In order to have concentration for your meditation and creation, you must needs be alone, and in that loneliness you then will find the company of all the world, but only spiritually, never physically, which could be felt the more releasing and relaxing, if not even as some sort of freedom and important liberation. This is individual, of course. Not everyone was born for loneliness, and not everyone has known the vital urge for loneliness, while some are better off alone, especially with their creative freedom, if that is what they were made for. Dreams as symbols of marriage. They say, I am married to my dreams. They do not harm me, we do not quarrel. Unfortunately, they are not always available. Like love, you have to wait for them patiently, as they cannot appear except naturally. Like women, their souls have no body, and what's worse, you cannot even touch them. So why should you keep them and have them at all? You just cannot do without them. They may trouble you and delight you, but they are always there, and that's the only certain thing about them. So just tolerate them, accept them as an inevitable part of your life. And the best thing of all, they cost you nothing. So just live with them and make the best of them as they are. The vanity of poetry. It's a trap. The poet writes a poem and is pleased with it, and is fooled into some self-complacence, a delusion of a narcissistic character. And if he cultivates this self-love, this self-satisfaction, he is lost and drowns in mirroring himself. A writer's occupation is a lonesome business. He can only write alone, and has to be alone for concentration. But if he then writes for others and about real people of some interest to him, like of love, the most constructive object, he is safe and will not drown, but keep on floating on the waves of love for others, if he just keeps up the outlook and forgets himself, as he is actually and only an observer. The incompatibility of truth and love. When you are in love, it's natural for you to idealize your love and see her in an aura of some magic beauty, thus presuming her to have the best of qualities, as love is generally most creative, making your imagination carry you away with fancies, as you couldn't love her without also dreaming of her. Then the truth turns out to be something entirely different, like an alien dimension, as you notice she has pimples. There's an opposite and different side to everything, and even the most ideal love will prove to have a different side. When hard reality starts importuning, cruel imposing practical demands and difficulties, practically love becomes an awesome enterprise, involving worries, problems and adversities, and that's not the love you bargained for. The problem of this incompatibility is you have to trick and wind your way through this new jungle, which could even prove a minefield prompting necessary caution, and you find yourself obliged to compromise with both your love and with reality to find the most delicate and difficult of balances. If you can keep that balance, you will have succeeded in maintaining both your love and save it through the reality, by endurance, by sticking to it, and by never quite forsaking your idealism, but keeping all that magic of your true original creative love in sight, as any captain never must neglect his compass. Galleristen. En konstnär ställer ut sina tavlor och betalar galleriet för sin konstutställning och hoppas galleriets besökare ska betala för tavlorna genom generösa uppskattande inköp, och någon gång kan detta företag till och med gå med vinst. En annan gör samma sak, men utan pengar och bara med litteratur och musik som man då presenterar på nätet helt gratis för vem som helst att ladda ner. Där finns alla hans verk i musik och litteratur utan inträde och i omedelbar tillgänglighet för envar i all världen med tillgång till nätet som världens mest öppna universitet och för alla människor universellt, oberoende av språk, nationalitet och behörighet. Och han har utsatts för invändningar och kritik för att utföra detta helt gratis utan annat försvar och förklaring än att han icke haft annat val. Internet är den fattige intellektualistens förlossning och frälsning, i synnerhet om alla möjliga alternativ uteslutits för honom, då alla förlag aldrig annat än ratat hans verk under 50-tals år utan annan förklaring än ren formalism, och då han även ratats som musiker för insisterandet på melodik, konsekvent harmonik och ren tonalitet, och då han ekonomiskt endast utsatts för svindel och bedrägerier och rent rofferi genom sanslösa skatter som lett till bankrutt och ruin. Alltså tycks han ej ha något val än att erbjuda hela sitt livsverk på nätet i en permanent, allomfattande utställning för vem som helst att besöka och fritt ta sig för av och hembära, medan allt ändå består genom digitalismens kontinuitet. The Exhibitionist, a Practical Solution. An artist exhibits his paintings and pays the gallery for his exhibition, hoping the gallery visitors will pay for his paintings by generous appreciative buys, and sometimes this could be profitable. Another does the same, but without money and with music and literature only, presenting his creations on the web to be downloaded free of charge for anyone. There all his works of literature and music are found, directly accessible for anyone with access to the web, the most open university to all the world, for people universally, regardless of language and nationality, exposing himself to criticism for doing this for nothing, without any other explanation than that he has no choice. Internet being the poor intellectual's redemption, especially since all other means have been closed to him, being socially shut out on no other grounds than formalism, being musically also excluded for insisting on consistency in melodiousness, tonality and harmony, exposed as well to frauds, deceits and even robbery, by exorbitant taxation leading hopelessly to bankruptcy and ruin, forcing him to live consistently under subsistence minimum. So he has no other choice than to present his life's work in a permanent, continuous, all-comprising exhibition on the web for anyone to visit and collect by downloads, while everything remains intact by digital continuity anyway. The fascination of evil. This is the weirdest kind of mystery, as it is practically omnipresent in all public media, above all, most movies loaded with atrocities, the domination unavoidable of sex and violence, and literature even mostly being dominated by intrigues of crimes and murder, while the opposite is rare, for the apparent reason that it does not sell. It's a phenomenon that started already from the beginning, the Homeric poems being all about the Trojan War, the Bible being full of death and dramas of destruction, Dante's Divine Comedy being nothing without hell, and Shakespeare filling up his stage with corpses. This is actually a challenge, the absurdity of evil being the supreme adversity which you must overcome like any trial of survival, even if to only prove the natural doctrine and thesis that what does not kill you has to make you stronger, and that is possibly the only meaning of it. Dreams, a necessary compensation for reality. When you wake up in the morning, sometimes there is something of a dream still lingering and actually providing the most lovely memory of sweetness, beauty, and exquisite happiness, but it will only last for one brief moment. As you open up your eyes and have reality take over brutally, all lasting bliss of dreams is gone, and all you have is the outrageous hardness, ugliness, brutality, and horror of your practical mundanity. Are all those dreams of beauty then just falsehood, delusions and illusions to deceive you, tempting you to any form of escapism, just to get out of mortal traps of practical ordeals? The contrast is too sharp between those dreams and facts of life to be acceptable, and any escapism appears quite necessary. Holding on to sweet remembrance of delicious dreams will tempt you to abandon real life altogether, but it is in fact a question of two different realities and even different dimensions. In your dreams you are transported to another better world, it seems, but it is as real as the concrete world, although abstract. Many are convinced their dreams are truer than reality, and that reality is just all humbug, lies and vain deceit, and they cannot be proven wrong, while on the other hand, your dreams can also never be considered evidence of any truth. The indispensable comfort of memories. The archive of your memories has the inevitable tendency to constantly increase in volume, depth and value, wherefore also you grow more reluctant with the years to do away with them, to do without them, and especially when you with terror feel them naturally fade away and disappear, the archive getting overloaded like a room or home that never is cleaned up. The harder then you stick to them from fear of losing them, while at the same time you fail to observe that they are dragging you behind and cluttering your mind to pull and slow you down, and that is difficult to remedy. It will then gradually become more difficult to start new enterprises and to start at all, as it is comfortable and convenient to just sit back and live on glories past. There is the danger and the death trap. It is a bog, and you must constantly be careful not to get bogged down, and the dire necessity occurs to constantly compel yourself and force yourself to never stop committing yourself to new efforts. That is how old concert pianists keep constantly at work and fit, like Rubinstein and Horowitz, still giving concerts in their 80s, but by constant urgent practicing and forcing themselves to hard work for hours every day, not to get bogged down in the comfortable trap and flattering dreams of pleasant memories. When you get drowned in love, there is no way out but to let it go and let yourself get drowned in it, and if possible to just enjoy it until you are smothered and can't bear it any longer. And that is the moment when you come to think of suicide as the only possible and definitely certain cure. But even that is just a gamble. You don't know what is beyond the grave, while staying on in the unbearable condition of your being buried, sacrificed, alive, with no end to the torture, is like being on the operation table in an operation which will never finish, but just carry on to cut you up in slices, for no purpose, as it seems, just can't be tolerated in the long run. Death could then be a deceptive liberator, but he always will have the advantage over you, since it's impossible to make him out. As the supreme and ultimate remaining mystery, the only certain thing about him being that he's always there, and waiting for you in the end, for good or worse. And since he is inevitable anyway, you might as well get lost in love while you are at it, and just let it do with you whatever it may please, while you had better make the best of it and just enjoy it. Delusional. It could happen to anyone who falls to the temptation to get too involved and fixed in his own ego, thereby losing all detachment and perspective to reality in something of a wishful thinking effort to replace the undesirable elements of this reality with their own, or at least impose their own by driving over and ignoring facts. They get immersed in what they think must be reality, but which is actually just castles in the air of their own fancy. No harm in this, but danger will occur if they gain power or some influence with many followers who let themselves be tricked into believing the attractive and seductive character of his conviction, falling like himself for the convincing and idealistic mirage. They get caught in their own spider's web of irresistible illusions, actually believing they are true, while their materialization generally proves a fatal self-deceit, especially to followers of credulous naivety who end up victims. The Lost Soul of Nikolai Gogol. He wrote a novel called Dead Souls, a grandiose social satire spiced with humour and a poignant, clever insight and analysis of his contemporary social order and society, with a brilliant eye for human idiosyncrasies. And he was widely read, appreciated and successful, publishing the first part of his Dead Souls without problems. But he then came under the precarious influence of a fanatic who seduced him to exaggerated piety as an extreme ascetic, breeding second thoughts about his writings, bringing his self-criticism to fatal levels, which induced him to commit the second part to flames, his doubts thus turning self-destructive, which he came to bitterly regret, exacerbating his religious fervour and asceticism to make him starve himself to death. He was Ukrainian, writing Taras Bulba as his first and greatest novel, a heroic and romantic family account of a rebellion against oppression of the Cossacks. One of the most brilliant masterpieces of the Russian literature, a kind of manual and gospel universally for insurrection against any power of inhuman and political repression. We are there again today, as the Ukrainians have to struggle for their life against intolerable force of terror by the greed of an oppressor. Gogol's novel thus became prophetic, giving him immortal status as a compensation for his early and untimely death. The enrichment of love. You are that kind of person of whose love you cannot tire, but you just must go on loving and adoring for the sake of lovableness of the subject, and the more you love her, the more motivated you will be to just to go on enjoying, loving and persisting, to hold on to the exquisite moment of a beauty seeming unable to fade, but only to increase with wisdom and maturity, like an old wine only growing finer with the years and increasing only by consuming it. This is not wishful thinking. This is true love when it works, pure magic if you like, but purest of all sorts, which only needs protection, careful cultivation, and profound sincerity of tenderness, of some infinity of generosity, to just be able to go on forever. The splendour of the underdog. As a pariah he is untouchable, protected by the honesty of his humility, as he has no capacity for hubris, being always beaten down, suppressed and chastised by his fate of static and perpetual poverty, and no mundane ambitions for career or power, being a philosopher by nature and allergic against vanity. As the innate humanist has constantly been driven over and ignored, rejected and despised by history, which all since 1914 only has concerned itself with the perpetual continuity of its own recklessness, of bolting in derailment, stuck in its own force, of running wild in senselessness and voluntary blindness, listening to only noise and madness of the demagogues, who only scream of thirst for blood and violence in apocalyptic hubris of destruction on a universal massive scale, while the despised, ignored, forgotten underdog keeps dodging in the underworld security and labouring in peace and quiet for the possibility of better times. Dead shadows. The problem is they are not dead, but keep on following you both day and night, and even in your sleep, as they will never rest and never go to sleep themselves, but keep on thriving and pursuing you, as if they would keep haunting you unto your grave. They are of various kinds and characters, but some are really dead and only kept alive by you, like losses and catastrophes, regrets and fatal traumas, like when you lost the fortune of your life. But such material losses are of no importance and no consequence, and should be buried dead and lifeless, as that's what they are. The case is different when it comes to those who passed away, as they are never dead, however carefully they were cremated and dispatched with obsequies and requiem masses. They will linger on, and you will never lose them like your parents. They will never quite abandon you, but keep on watching and safeguarding you for good, like your dear departed friends as well, who meant something to you. They will never leave you, but continue keeping you good company to prove that they can never die. They are no shadows dark, but rather actually the opposite, as they will keep on shining up your way and lighting in your life, and even more so than when they were mortal. The loveliest song about love. Translation of a war poem of 1918 by Ture Nerman. The loveliest song about love never reached to be published. It was stuck in a dream in Montmartre with an impoverished student of Paris. It should have spread light across countries and made even spring kneel in worship, and the world would have pressed to its heart a new and another Musée. He should have strode along the quays with a pale, tiny, blue-eyed Lucille, and made poems of kisses and violets in the magical night of April. But the loveliest song about love never came to be published. It was buried alive in a mass grave in Flanders, with the heart of a poor Paris student. The sanctity of boredom. They say that boredom is a luxury and even something of a privilege, since if you have the capability of feeling bored, you have a qualified detachment from reality, which actually makes boredom something of a sanity. And if you reach that far in reasoning about it, your next step will be to fill the vacuum of boredom with activity of any kind, and even just of mental stuff. And thus your boredom is transformed into energy, which actually is a moral power that could practically be applied constructively to only positive and beneficial ends. Is this just nonsense, or does it make any sense? That is another matter of discussion for expanding the philosophy of boredom.